Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's election season, as we all know, and we're going to be discussing the first of many of these debates that took place. You know, we've got a vice presidential debate coming up. We got, I believe, a few other within the next couple of weeks. Election day is literally a month away. Time is flying and it's not slowing down. Remember what I said, the universe is always dynamic and never static. It's always going forward, never stops. So it's crunch time for the next few weeks, and with October coming up, or as I'm dubbing it, Axtober, I'm going to be doubling down and getting really busy, especially with this election year, so lots to be prepared. I also got, weekly polling that I'm going to do, every Saturday, reviewing the polls every week, seeing what has and has not changed, seeing what needs to be done, and, predictions on what I think is going to happen based on polling numbers that we're going to see, especially when it comes to the swing states that we're going to be talking about. So much is prepared. Lots to talk about. Big news day, big news week, big news month even. So stick around, make sure you are subscribed, make sure those notifications are turned on because again, I'm your news guy. That's what I do. Want to keep each and every single one of y'all up to date with everything as much as I can. This is why you subscribe to the channel, so press that little button that you see on your screen. Doesn't take you too long, takes you literally a zeptosecond to do so. So make sure you are subbed so you don't miss out on future videos. Alright, let's talk about the first debate that we got between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, obviously, this isn't the first official, presidential debate that happened. If you don't remember, early around September, that fucking shit show that I'm glad that I did not watch. This one was between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and from what I heard, that was arguably the worst train wreck that most people have ever seen, and is pretty much what led Joe Biden to drop out of the race, knowing how old he is and knowing his age and knowing the state of the country with his leadership. So I didn't watch it, I didn't cover it. Well, that is for obvious reasons because of how much of a train wreck it was. And this debate that we're going to be talking about was not any different, at least in my opinion. It was just as brain-rotty and cringe-worthy in its own right. I mean, this literally just happened around the month of September, around the same month, the iPhone 16 keynote, so around that same week, around the week of the anniversary of 9/11. We'll get into that because that is technically related to one another. So I was kind of hesitant to make a video about it immediately, but now I think, especially with the vice presidential debate coming up, I think it is the right time for me to vent about it. Because, a lot of stuff happened for the past few weeks. Again, future videos will be coming about those. But especially today, now is the time I need to talk about this. Now is the time for me to talk about US politics. I mean, I can't just sit here and think about this shit for the rest of until the election starts. It was just bad and just completely fucking chaotic. I mean, aside from maybe Trump and how he kinda sorta did in this debate on paper, objectively, on a neutral perspective, I really don't see anything good that came out of it. This first presidential debate, it was a nightmare. Just as bad as the first one with Joe Biden. Now, obviously, in every single election cycle here in the United States, we have these things called presidential debates, and we all know the debates, it's supposed to be this important opportunity for the country to see and hear the presidential candidates, give their takes and, possible policies or whatever it might be. It's essentially giving voters a reason to vote for them and to support them, and pleading their case for why they should be president over the other guy or gal. And in a way, that's exactly what we got, thankfully. There were some good points in this debate, there were some bad points in this debate, but how it was handled, with the moderation and whatnot, the questions that were being asked, the fact-checking, and other things in between, it almost felt like it was far from what we got. I mean, this is literally 3 years in a row where the first ever presidential debate, at least with the two confirmed candidates that are speaking, was just nothing but a complete and total clusterfuck. And to be fair, I'm almost starting to wonder if debates like these are even something that we should be doing anymore. No wonder people are going to say we're going to have at least 1 or 2 debates every year. I could see why nobody wants to fucking bother with them anymore. I mean, first and foremost, before we even get into the shit show that was this, let me ask this question. When was the last actually good presidential debate? When was the last time where the presidential candidates spoke their piece, they actually made sense, and it wasn't just, two people bragging about their rallies and who's more evil than the other and, name-calling nonstop? When was the last time we had a fair debate where the moderators were not picking sides and were not fact-checking the other guy nonstop and were not letting him speak? When was the last time we got to experience that, right? Because it certainly hasn't been the last 10 or so years, the last 3 elections or so. But this was obviously not the best, at least in my opinion, that I have seen. So now it's between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is the nominee for the Democrats because Joe Biden is too old and he had to drop out. And it really just wasn't great, at least in my opinion. So obviously there was no primaries that went on because, Trump overall was the nominee for the Republicans regardless, especially what he's been going through. They did have a Republican primary that went on, but obviously, Trump was far and beyond the one for the Republicans, at least. He's the one fitted for it. He's proven himself. And most of the GOP agreed with that and voted for him overwhelmingly. He essentially ran unopposed if you really think about it. Same with Joe Biden, but he had to drop out and Kamala Harris had to take his place because the whole practice is if a presidential candidate drops out, especially when they become nominated, the vice president has to take over. It's the same with nominations. The running mate usually takes over when the incumbent drops out after he is nominated. So because of that, we essentially just sat there for the last couple of hours and watched 2 people yell at each other about various topics, half of which that didn't actually matter to Americans, and the other half just being the same repeated thing over and over again, and just completely dodging whatever question that is asked, and not answering it thoroughly and accurately. I mean, they're up there on stage, they're arguing about the important, very heated devising topics on who has more people that show up in their rallies. Whose rallies have more people? My rally has more people than your rally. People in your rallies leave early before the rally ends. Your rally is, it's AI generated. I have more people in my rallies. So it's who has more people in their rallies or which side's felony fucking convictions are the most damning. This woman is a communist. This man is a fascist. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. Oh my god, man. What the fuck are we doing? I get that it's entertaining. Trump is doing his thing like he always does in these debates, which is pretty much the only bright spot of this debate. Aside from that, it literally was like I was listening to a childish presidential debate that sounded like it was being generated by ChatGPT. At some points, I wished Chris Christie could just hop on stage without actually destroying everything and causing an earthquake. I think Queso's fans don't even realize that he does in fact have competition when it comes to his weight. Chris Christie definitely does rival that. But at some points of this debate, I wish Chris Christie could just jump on and say, I don't want any of these people on stage sounding like they come out of ChatGPT, referencing the ChatGPT quip that he did in the first Republican presidential debate, because that's basically what it sounded like. I don't know, dude. It's almost like parody. It feels like at this point, it almost feels like a joke. And despite being the greatest and most powerful global superpower known to man with the greatest democracy ever, instead, we're nothing but a fucking butt end of the joke as the American people. Inflation has been out of control. We're still suffering through global shortages of everything, even to this day. The cost of living has continued to rise. Wages haven't kept up with the growth. The housing market pretty much had its worst collapse in its history. More and more young people still live with their parents because of how expensive things have gotten, even if they have college degrees. We're spending and wasting all of this money on forever wars that happen fucking halfway across the goddamn earth. Americans are dying because, they can't afford or get proper health care, or they're addicted to fentanyl, or gun crimes, or whatever it may be, right? We have an out-of-control southern border leading to an unprecedented border crisis that we haven't seen since pretty much ever. Our educational apparatus is a complete and total clusterfuck. I mean, these are all different issues in the country, and when it came down to actually answering effectively towards virtually any question that could have mattered, both sides just really didn't do the job. I mean, I didn't find myself overly inspired by anything Trump said, even though, to be completely fair, and I gotta give credit where credit is due, I could have at least fucking understood what Donald Trump was saying. Trump was able to answer these questions that were actually being given to him, but occasionally he will always shift to talking about the border when being asked about a certain question. Now, obviously, the border is pretty important to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, the border crisis that we're currently suffering is contributing to a lot of the drugs and the gun crime that we're seeing. But there are also other issues that I had with Trump in this debate. Like, for instance, with the repeal and replace Obamacare. If you have a plan, just talk about the plan. Don't say you have a concept of a plan if you don't know what the plan is. Not necessarily a good look. The goal of the debate is to convince the people of the middle, the undecided voters. What plans do you have? Convince those people why you should vote for you. Your base will already vote for you regardless and say you won the debate. When you are debating, you have to target the independents, the undecided voters, the people in the middle of why you should vote for you, why you have the best policies, why your plans are the best. Of course, the highlight of that debate was the eating the cats, eating the dogs sort of thing. This actually is a story which I will talk about in a later video about the whole panic that happened in not Cleveland, it was somewhere in Ohio, Springfield, Ohio. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There was this situation in Springfield, Ohio, where there's reports of pets going missing in that city, in some of these neighborhoods, and reportedly, it was being claimed that some of these pets that have been going missing are being seen eaten, allegedly by Haitian immigrants. Because, as you might know, Haiti had this earthquake 14 years ago, and since then there's been a lot of migrants coming into the country from Haiti. And this year we had a story where people are supposedly eating each other in that country only because of the lack of food and resources in that island nation and how much of an absolute disaster of a country it has been throughout its history. It is just an unfortunate situation that the country is going through. And I really, and I mean seriously, feel so bad for the nation of Haiti. I really do. I feel bad for its people, and they got really nice people. They're not what some of these people are portraying them as such. There are a ton of good Haitians out there, and they'll tell you the same exact stories of what it's like back in their country, and let me tell you, it ain't pretty. But again, it's being supposedly linked to one another because of the whole cannibalism situation. And because of that, because one story is similar to another, they kind of sort of they get mixed together, and it's being perceived as, Haitians are the ones that eat animals and they do this and that this is normal for their culture, when in actuality, it isn't. Yes, Haiti is known to practice voodoo, but that's not the only place where voodoo is practiced. Voodoo is also practiced in the state of Louisiana, particularly in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. That's pretty much the identity of the state. Oftentimes, voodoo is not necessarily linked towards Haiti, but rather Louisiana and New Orleans. Point being, you shouldn't blame an entire country for what some people in some small town in Ohio are doing. It's not their fault. That's not their culture. If anything, if you take a look at the demographics and religion of the country of Haiti, the vast majority of the country is Roman Catholic, and only 2% of the population actually practice voodoo. So just have to point that out real quick. But outside of all the good, the bad, and the evil, Trump still did what he could in that debate. And most of what Trump was talking about was literally just the exact same as what he talked about with Elon Musk in the X space, which I made a video about. So you can just listen to that. When he talks about the border, he actually explains why countries like Venezuela, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, the reason why these countries had significantly lower crime rate was because they were shipped out, because they never were incarcerated. They've been exiled elsewhere. There's a reason why people from these countries left those countries, and it was to evade some of the crime and violence that was plaguing their home country. How do you think these actual immigrants would feel if the crime that they fled came back to their new country that they moved to? Like what's happening with Colorado and some of these gangs, like breaking into people's homes and terrorizing them. How do you think these people feel? Because they fled that violence. They fled their country and came to the US not just seeking for a better life, but to escape exactly that. It's a slap in the face to these people who fled these countries, and it just shouldn't be tolerated. And this is exactly why you need security. So Trump was literally echoing exactly what he was saying in the X space with Elon Musk. Like, I will give Trump the benefit of the doubt with what he is saying, but this was still far from a perfect performance from him. And I've seen Trump debate before. This wasn't like his perfect A-OK debates that he had over the years. But at the very least, he was able to try and do his best with what he is saying. And this leads me to my main point of why this debate sucked. The moderators. These have to be the worst moderators that I've seen. Let the dude speak. To summarize how this debate went with these moderators, this clip pretty much explains how it all went.
Now, our first question tonight goes to Mr. Frog.
Mr. Frog, why are you so evil? You have 1 second to respond.
Hello,
Time's up, plus you're wrong. The next question is for our beloved and highly intelligent president. Why are you so amazing? You have unlimited time to respond.
Presidential policy.
Gotta love smiling friends. Very accurate. Like, watching this debate kind of felt like I was watching a 3 versus 1 debate, not a 1v1. Again, gotta give the benefit of the doubt. They did ask rough questions towards Trump. You have to ask these tough questions to both candidates. But what does Kamala get with her tough questions? Aside from being, she was the border czar for the entire Biden administration, why don't you ask questions about the border? Because I don't think, record numbers of crossings that is roughly akin to the population of Chile is necessarily a good thing or a good look for her. Meanwhile, when Trump answers the same question, it's just nonstop fact-checking. Let the guy speak. Like, the more I was hearing these moderators, the more it kind of resembled a 3-on-1 debate. Moderators are supposed to be neutral in order for it to be fair. You need to ask the tough questions to both candidates, not one. And you shouldn't be necessarily repeating the same thing that the other side is repeating. I saw a little bit of that when watching that debate, and it's to the point where it's noticeable. The fact-checking, the interrupting, repeating the same things that aren't necessarily true. I just didn't see the ABC moderators doing necessarily a good job with what they were doing, and they were a huge pain in the ass. And finally, we get to Kamala Harris, who wasn't necessarily that great either. I know a lot of her core fans, much like with Trump's core fans, are going to say that he or she won the debate hands down. Trump's core fan base are saying that Trump won that debate. Kamala Harris's core fan base is saying that she won this debate hands down. But again, in this video, I am looking at this debate in the perspective of a neutral, undecided voter. The people in the middle. That's the perspective that I'm looking at. And Harris did not impress me in this debate whatsoever. Like, every time she gets asked this question, like, what is your plan for the economy? Well, I have a plan. And then she proceeds not to explain it. What's your plan? If you have a plan, why don't you explain it? Same with Trump. Trump says he has a concept of a plan but doesn't explain it. Harris is no different. What is the plan? You are on national TV. People are watching. Explain the plan to your people. It's not that hard. When you say you have a plan and you proceed not to talk about that plan, to some of these people, that's kind of insinuating that you don't actually have a plan put in place. And I've been doing a lot of fact-checking when I was watching this debate, and believe me, there's a lot of stuff that Kamala said in that debate that obviously just aren't true. For instance, Project 2025, which I've noticed for the Democrats, this has been used as like a boogeyman not to vote Republican. There's nothing on the Trump campaign that mentions Project 2025 whatsoever. Project 2025 is not Trump's creation. It is not the creation from the Republicans. Project 2025 is an idea that was created by the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, or a super PAC, that is not affiliated with the Trump campaign. Wikipedia calls it a quote-unquote far-right initiative, even though it might sound like it. It's not really super-duper-duper far-right, although it's definitely what you might consider out there. Even Trump himself thinks it's too outlandish for him. There is just so much in Project 2025 that just doesn't make any sense. And if it were to be implemented, in actuality, would be ridiculously unconstitutional. And the courts would nuke it to orbit day -1. No thing like that would ever survive, and it pretty much goes against the Constitution in every way, shape, and form. I'm not going to talk about it too much in here because, again, that deserves another video. Axtober is here, so that will be one of these videos for the month, but they keep tying it to Trump even though he explicitly says repeatedly that he has no idea what it is. Well, actually, that's a lie. He does know what it is, but even if he has read it before, he doesn't want to associate with it. He already has his own plan put in place. His plan is Agenda 47, which was created by him, and it's his own campaign plan. Agenda 47 is not Project 2025, so keep that in mind. Like, Agenda 47 does not call for a national abortion ban. Project 2025 does. But they keep tying it to the GOP nonstop, even though most, if not all, Americans disagree with it already. But again, as I mentioned, his plan is completely different from this other plan that was created by a think tank. They have no ties. They are very different from one another. But they keep saying that they're exactly the same plan, which is not true. And here's one stupid thing that Kamala said that I actually hated. I know there are some people who are like, turned off on Trump because of what happened on January 6th. Although, if you look at the full context of that situation, Trump told some of these people who were there at January 6th to go home with peace. And he even insisted that his supporters act accordingly and protest peacefully. So Kamala Harris, when she brought up January 6th, she said that it was the worst attack to our democracy since 9/11. Are you kidding me? So you're telling me that a situation where terrorists hijacked commercial airliners and flew them into 2 buildings, plus a federal building, killing nearly 3,000 innocent lives, is comparable to a situation where supporters of a presidential candidate got a little too rowdy and 6 people were killed in it? Look, I get it. January 6th was bad, okay? I totally understand that. But to say that it was worse or just as bad as 9/11, where 3,000 people were killed, one of the darkest, saddest, and most tragic days that have ever happened in this country's history, that is just brain dead. That is just completely absurd. There is no way 2 of these are even comparable. I can already fact check the list of lies that was said in this. 1, January 6th was not worse than 9/11. 2, Project 2025 and Agenda 47 are completely different things. And while we're on the topic of January 6th, I keep hearing the same very fine people on both sides trope in that debate too, insinuating that Trump was going to invite David Duke and or Richard Spencer to the White House. Even USA Today has an article, which I will link in the description down below. They fact-checked Trump did condemn white supremacists in his very fine people speech. Even Snopes fact-checked it too. Donald Trump did not call neo-Nazis and white supremacists who attended that rally in Charlottesville very fine people. The whole context is he was calling people protesting the renaming of some park and a Robert E. Lee statue that happened to be there. I am no stranger to Confederate symbols. I see them everywhere as somebody who lives in a former Confederate state. I understand your heritage, it's your freedom of speech, but that's what some of these protests that were going on in Charlottesville were all for, because of the removal of a statue and the renaming of a park. What was not expected was neo-Nazis and white supremacists, along with extreme far-left Antifa, fighting each other while these protests were going on. Trump was referring to the protesters as very fine people, and he called out the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists in that full address that he did. So that right here was my 4th fact check from this debate. Maybe 4, maybe 5. I don't know. I lost count of how many times I had to fact check literally everybody in this debate. So yeah, you can obviously tell how much of a train wreck it was just by what I just described alone. It was one of the worst debates that I, in my opinion, have seen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there was nothing good about it. If you take away like the name calling and the fact checking and the stuff that had to be fact checked, at least a good chunk of that was fair for the most part. Trump had a mid-performance in that debate. The moderators weren't necessarily fair. Again, there was some bias in there, including some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier about Project 2025, Very Fine People, January 6th, all that. Trump at the very least stood his ground and essentially did what he could. Kamala also did what she could, but her performance was just as bad, if not worse. And don't get me wrong, in most of these interviews, when I see Kamala get asked a tough question, oftentimes she just laughs it off, like when she's asked about the border. I kind of saw a little bit of hints of that in that debate too. Like on the first debate with Joe Biden, it was just him stuttering and unable to form a goddamn coherent sentence if his life depended on it. He gets asked, "Hey Joe, what do you plan on making the economy better? What are you gonna do?" Corn pop. It's just, oh my goodness fucking gracious. This current administration, in my experience, has not been all great. And to be fair, Joe Biden dropped out way too late. He should have been out of the race much earlier. Kamala Harris is just not the right person. And the Democrats really should be ashamed. They were in this delusion thinking that Joe was the right person to run for a second term, disregarding his age, disregarding how much of a clusterfuck his administration has been. 2024 should have been an open field primary for the Democrats. This right here is just not a good strategy. If I'm being honest, everyone thought 2016 was going to be a walk for Hillary Clinton, right? Because no one would have figured that a businessman named Donald Trump could have won the election. But, of course, instead of picking Bernie Sanders or literally anybody else, the Democrats, they picked the worst option out of all of their candidates. And then they put her up on stage. Then it turns out people voted for Trump and he wins. Then 2020 comes along and the Democrats, they get their opportunity back, right? They got options like Andrew Yang, Kirsten Gillibrand, Tulsi Gabbard, Marianne Williamson, and maybe Pete Buttigieg. But instead, they picked Joe Biden, who already showed signs of cognitive decline, and they still win office back with Biden. And again, like I mentioned, even I knew he wasn't the right person moving forward. Look at the country right now and see for yourself. Fast forward to 2024, Joe Biden drops out because he's too old to run, and then we get somebody who's in there who is pretty much essentially a Hillary Clinton 2.0. I mean, again, if he dropped out earlier, in 2022, 2023, and we actually had an open field Democratic primary, that would have made sense. But because of the president-vice president role and how late it happened, Kamala Harris had to step in because she's the VP of the incumbent running for president. And they can't do another primary this late in the game. So that's basically what happened. Now, who won this debate? Realistically, I can't really say because both had mediocre performances, at least in my opinion. Again, I'm viewing this from a neutral perspective, the undecided voter perspective. None of these candidates really overwhelmingly inspired me. Neither candidate made me want to go up from my seat and say, "Yep, that's my guy. I'm voting for ya." But if you really want to force me to pick a winner, if I had to choose between these two, honestly, on paper, I would probably pick Trump. And I'm not even saying this because I'm like, "Oh, he absolutely killed this debate. He walked all over Kamala Harris. Trump 2024, and I'm certainly not the type of guy who has a Donald Trump plushie that I spoon with every day. There are some people out there that actually worship this dude, and they think he's the second coming of Jesus. I'm not that type of guy. I don't overly worship anybody here. Nobody's immune to my criticism. But when a person you're going up against is the VP of the current administration, which hasn't been all the greatest and has a low approval rating, with all the stuff that is happening domestically and around the world, and you are proven because you have been in office before, you have policies put in place that are all set and ready to go, while your opponent has to have help and laughs every time she gets a tough question, you kinda sort of are, automatically a shoo-in to win, at least on paper. I already know what Trump stands on every issue. He's been in office before, I've heard him talk before, he has a track record, both candidates have a track record. However, when I look at Kamala Harris, it's just sloganeering and nothing more. And again, this was de facto 3-on-1, so Trump at least stood his ground with what he was doing. And not like Trump is the perfect candidate too. Even after I switched my views, I still criticize Trump. Nobody's perfect. Like me personally, the Dems have already shot themselves in the foot multiple times. They're completely incompetent, and at times have no idea what they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily help that Dick Cheney is the one endorsing Kamala Harris. Yes, that Dick Cheney. So there's just so much red flags with Kamala already that, kind of rub me the wrong way. If I want someone to run the country, I want someone who already has a proven track record and is actually qualified for the job. That right there is what's most important. All we have next is the vice presidential debate with JD Vance and Tim Walz. I don't know if I'm going to be live for that. I'll definitely be watching, and for sure I will be live tweeting, so stay tuned for that. Although I'm not going to rule out a potential live stream of me reacting to the VP debate. I think it's going to be so much more watchable than the presidential debate that we got earlier. JD Vance and Tim Walz, they're very good debaters. I reckon it's going to be pretty fun to watch them duke it out on the debate stage. Hopefully the moderation is more fair, although highly doubt it. But yeah, that was my thoughts on the Trainwreck debate. Well, the first debate that happened between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Hopefully there is more. Hopefully they do get better along the way. Stay tuned for my weekly polling analysis. I will be covering the election more and more as we get closer. We're like weeks away from Election Day. We might get an October surprise here or there. Again, the news is always dynamic, never static. There's always going to be breaking news. There's going to be new information. Old information gets outdated. It ain't going to be easy, but I'm going to try my best to work around the clock to get as much information to you as much as possible as your news guy, because that's what I do. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the little notification bell. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias, links are in the description below. Share this video around with your friends, families, boyfriends, girlfriends, enemies, whomever. Definitely helps me out a lot, helps the video grow, and helps grow the channel if you were to share this video with whomever you know. We're going to be having a lot of content coming your way, so there isn't a better time to subscribe to the channel than now. I'm ready for it all. I hope you are. I'll also be posting on my X as well, so be sure to follow me at that as well. That's where I'm the most active, at AXY0M. I'll put it to you on screen. But yeah, guys, anyways, like, subscribe, ring notifications, and until then, take care, talk soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. You're awesome.